It was 2008 in May. I was having chest pain. I was having a tightness, a sort of crampy sensation in my chest, which concerned me a little because I was 49 years of age at the time, and I knew I probably should have myself checked up. So I went, to the doctor and had tests, and the doctor just simply said to me, "Look, we don't know what's going on. This could be your heart. It might not be. Please just take it easy, relax a little, don't try and do too much." So I went home and spent the next week or so just relaxing and trying to look after myself. And after a week or a week and a half, I guess, the pain started to recede a little bit, and I started to feel a bit better and felt like I was a bit more capable of doing a few things. So I opened the back door and looked out on my yard and realized this is a mess. I need to clean this up. So went to get my line trimmer from the garage and started to pull on the cord to try and start this machine, which is a very stubborn machine to start, unfortunately. And continuing to try and pull on this cord and get this machine to kick over and fire up. And as this happened, I was suddenly hit with a very painful sensation across my chest, like a massive cramp. It was just like my whole chest was being pulled in together, and it made it difficult to breathe. And as this was happening, I heard a very loud voice. I still don't know if it was in my head or if it was actually audible, but a very loud voice. And I knew this was the voice of God speaking to me. And he said to me at that time, he said, "You are going to die, but I have things for you to do." And I was very shocked to hear this, of course. No one wants to hear that they're going to die. But then he also said, "There are things I want you to do." So I was a little confused and just said, "Lord, what do you mean?" And he just said, "Go inside, pack a bag, call an ambulance, and be ready to go." So I did this. I was still able to walk around and move quite okay. So I went inside, packed the bag, called an ambulance, and they arrived fairly quickly to pick me up and take me to the hospital. One of these ambulance operators was on his first day on the job, so he was basically the apprentice, and he started to give me the treatment and said, "We're just going to give you anginine and morphine, which is the standard treatment to lower blood pressure." And they did this and just took my readings, took my pulse, and then said, "Okay, we'll take you off to hospital." And they loaded me on the gurney and out into the ambulance, and away we went to the hospital. On the way, as we were traveling, they said, "Look, we're going to give you another shot of morphine, some more anginine, just to make sure your blood pressure's well down so that it's safe for your heart," which they did. And at this point, I started to spin. The world started to spin, and I said, "I'm going to pass out. I'm going." And at that point, I passed out, and it was complete darkness. All right, so I passed out, and I found myself floating in darkness. And I have passed out before in my life, but this was different. This was not the same. I was aware of what was happening. I was aware that I was no longer in my body. I was aware that I was just floating, that I was a disembodied spirit, just floating along without any physical attachments. I felt very light. I felt as if I was weightless completely. It was a very dreamy and pleasant sensation at first, and I thought, wow, this is really something different. I wonder what's going on here. And I continued to float along in this darkness, and as a few seconds went by, I started to think to myself, I think I may have died. I think I'm out of my body. I think I've left my body behind, and I'm dead, and I'm gone. And at that point, I started to become afraid, because nobody really wants to die. So I was in a slightly fearful state. And as I started to fear, I started to drift downward. And this, of course, made me even more afraid. So I sort of wanted to look down and check what was beneath me. And this was somewhat of a mistake, because I just sensed that beneath me was this bottomless pit, this absolutely endless void of nothingness. And it scared me. It made me quite afraid. So at this point, being a Christian, I just called out to Jesus. I just called out with all of my strength. I just said, Jesus, come and help me. Jesus, help me out of this. And continued to float, and I continued to be afraid, and I continued to drift down. But after a couple of minutes, I guess, of this, suddenly out of nowhere, this very strong arm came and just grabbed my forearm like this. And he said to me, you don't want to go that way. And he started to pull me upward very, very quickly. So I was racing up through whatever dimension or space this was at an incredible speed. And this being was just pulling me upward through streaks of blurred light. I don't know what it was. It was a bit like the Star Trek going into hyperspace or whatever, warp speed. But I was moving at an incredible rate. I could sense that. I just still don't know what the environment was that I was traveling through. So I was seeing things flashing past me. It may well have been a tunnel. It probably was a tunnel. We were traveling upward. It felt like a minute or two. We were traveling very, very quickly. So I just imagine we covered some vast distance. I don't know how much space and time is relevant to that dimension. But we went for some period of time, and then suddenly we just came to rest. And the darkness had receded, and there was a beautiful misty light. It was quite a misty environment. I still don't know if this was my own perception or if that's actually the way the environment was, but it felt a little cloudy, and I gradually adjusted to seeing what was around me. And I could see that there were a group of what could only be angels standing around me. Would have been about 5 or 6 at least, of these angels standing in a semicircle around me, and they were big. They were big. They were huge. At this point in time, I began to have sensations and feelings that were very different. Like I'd come from a position of fear and drifting downward, and I came into this position of just being overwhelmed by love. And it was a beautiful love. It was a stronger love than I'd ever experienced before. It was as if my chest was expanding. It was as if it was going to burst with the power of this love, with the strength and the dimension of this love. So I was just totally overwhelmed and lay back and just let this love just flow into me, because it was so beautiful. It was such a wonderful experience. I can't really describe it adequately with words, but just feeling this flow of beautiful love and affection and care. And I just thought to myself, I'm home. This is where I've always wanted to be. This is beautiful, and this is the most perfect existence I have ever experienced. So I was just lying back with all of this going through my mind. And then the one who came to pick me up, he came towards me and just said, you have some choices to make. He said, we've come out to meet you. You have a choice where you can either come on with us into paradise, or you can choose to go back to your life, and the choice is yours. So what would you like to do? And at that point I had to stop and think, wow, this is a big decision. This is a huge decision. Now, I was so happy and so overjoyed, and thought to myself, do I really want to leave this and go back into my life? And I had a lot of things to weigh up and a lot of things to consider. I had children ranging from 8 to 30 at that point in time. And one of my children, my daughter, had been struck by a car and she was brain injured. And I was really the only parent who was spending time with her and speaking into her life. And my younger children needed me as their father. So I had a really big think about this. And as I was thinking about it, I began to fear again, because it sort of reoccurred to me that I'm dead. Wow, I'm actually here and I'm dead. And I began to get fearful again. And as I did, the angels reacted very strongly, and they came towards me and said, no. And they calmed me down. And they reduced my fear and just filled me with that peace and that love again. And they said to me, there's no fear here. We don't have fear. Fear is a very alien experience in this environment. So they very much just calmed me down and put me to rest and at peace again. And when I say they said to me, I need to explain this. There are no words. There was no lip movement. There was no speech. This was just something that was direct from them into my awareness. Telepathic, if you like, but that was certainly what was happening. Was I could feel their thoughts. They could feel my thoughts. And we were communicating on that level. So I calmed down a bit and I said to them, look, I have responsibilities. I don't feel my work is done. And I also thought of what God had said to me. I have things for you to do. And I thought, I don't feel I've completed my task on earth. So I really do need to return. I really do need to go back there and see these things through and complete my life's work. So at that point, this main leader said to one of the other angels, go and check the vessel, see if the vessel is good. They were his actual words as such. So one of these angels took off, and I could see this angel floating off and heading back down. And in the extreme distance, I could see myself lying in the ambulance. I could see my body way, way off somewhere. I don't know how that's possible, but that was what I experienced. I turned and I said to this one leader character who had come and collected me, I said, who are you? Who are you exactly? You're not the same as these, because he was not the same as the other angels. And he seemed to be the one that was emanating this incredible love more than anyone else. And he just looked at me and said, I am the one you call Lord. Now, for me, there's only one person in all of history that I call Lord, and that's Jesus. And this was Jesus that I was sitting in front of. And that really did overwhelm me at that point. And I was just totally taken aback. I just sort of fell down at his feet as such and just said, wow, Lord, it's so incredible that I'm here with you. I am just totally overwhelmed to be with you. And he started to once again fill me with this amazing love, and he sat me up and just said, I want to do some healing. You've been through some very tough times and you've been very damaged. And I want to come inside you and I want to rearrange some things and I want to heal your soul. So I said, please do. I was quite keen for that to happen. So at this point, he actually entered into me. Now, it's a hard thing to describe, but I actually felt him come inside me, and I felt my whole mind blending with his as such. And he started to shift things and break negativity and break strongholds and remove grief. And I could feel all these emotions and mental areas within me start to shift around and rearrange, and it was incredibly refreshing. I could just feel it was like stale old rooms being opened up and aired out, and all sorts of things started to happen within me that were very positive. But the thing I remember most about that moment was not what was happening within me, but what I felt while he was joined to me. It was his awareness and the scale of who he is. And at that point in time, I actually experienced infinity. I experienced the universe. He is aware of everything. His knowledge encompasses all things. And he would know if there's an insect under a rock in Africa, and he'd know if there's a child crying in Brazil, and he'd know every single event that was going on. He had it within his grasp and within his power. It's what we call omniscience, and I really did feel the extent of that awareness within him, and it was mind-boggling. It's something I will never forget. It's something so exciting and so powerful. I don't think people realize the nature of Jesus and his unity with God, which is unity with all things, unity with the universe. He actually encompasses the entirety of creation within him. And that to me was the thing I will never forget. That is the thing that has totally changed my life, to understand the role that Jesus, that the Messiah plays in the universe is massive. It was interesting how he presented himself to me. And this is one of the things that I've said to people. If I had not asked who he was, I would only have known that I was in the presence of a magnificent being that was just absolutely flooding me with love and knowledge and wisdom and all these things. But if I had not asked him who he was, I don't think I would have found out. I would have just assumed maybe, but I asked him who he was, and then he told me. I don't think he goes around necessarily displaying his might and his power. I think there's a number of different ways he works. I talk about this a little in my book, where it's as if he's inhabiting a position, like, for example, a prime minister or a president inhabits a position. They are in the seat of power, the throne of power, and yet they go home and they sleep in a bed and they have their family and they have a normal life, and they inhabit both of those existences. And I think that's how it is with Jesus, in that he can be on the throne, but he can also be in someone's bedroom, talking with them at night in a dream, or he can be wherever he wants to be and however he wishes to manifest. He has the extent of that power. All authority is given unto him, as it says in the Bible. So he can choose how he wants to present himself to people. He can choose how he wants to appear in people's lives. After this healing process and this joining process, he said, okay, let's see what's happening here. And the angel actually returned and said, the vessel is good. He can return. So Jesus then just sort of had a discussion with the angels, something I wasn't able to really make out. But he said to me then, we'll send you back, but first there are things I need to talk with you about. And he started to reveal to me things that were coming up. And he said to me, if you go back, you must understand that the choice is yours as to how the rest of your life plays out. He said, if you go down the wrong path, you will not return. If you go down the right path, you will return. So the choice is yours. The actions you take, the things you decide on in your lifetime, they will be the deciding factor on when you return or how you return back to paradise. And I sort of understood that, and I realized, yes, well, it's not always just a given that we will go there. And I needed to stay in a life that was, I guess, connected to him, was the sense that I had. He then started to tell me about people I would meet and things that would happen to me once I returned, and gave me some warnings about, like, this particular person might be a risk to you, this event might be something that is difficult for you. And they actually showed me, it was like looking at a video through a veil. They actually showed me some of the events that would come up in my life, and showed me some of the things further on in time that were a little frightening about the earth and where it was heading. There was some things they were showing me and saying, look, yeah, show him this bit. And there were other things they were saying, no, he shouldn't see this. And they were giving me like an edited version of future events in my life, which was quite incredible. Like, I've heard a lot about life reviews from other people where, you see a lot of your past in your near-death experience. But I was actually looking at my future in the near-death experience. And that was quite powerful and something I'll never forget. Some of those things I no longer remember. Some of those things I can't recall. I just cannot bring back. But some of them I can. And after a little period of this, eventually he said, okay, I think we've told you all the things you need to know. Now it's time to send you back. So I was just still overwhelmed by the fact that I was with Jesus and with angels. And I just sort of said, look, I don't really want to go back, but I do feel I need to go back. And he understood and just said, yeah, we'll send you off now. And so I felt myself floating down, and once again I felt myself weightless and in this dark, empty environment. And then I saw a light, not a massive, huge light above, but a light, and I just sort of headed for that light. And as I reached it, bang, I was back in my body inside the ambulance. I took a massive breath, just a huge gasp, and I became conscious again. And look, coming back into the body, not a pleasant experience. It was heavy. It felt like hitting concrete in comparison to where I had been. I could feel this oppressive sensation of evil. I could feel this oppressive sensation that everything was heavy and clumsy and physical. And I've been free from that. And it was a beautiful thing to be free from that. The spiritual existence is a fantastic and wonderful thing to have. Everything felt less real when I came back into my body. The sense of reality there is much stronger. That's the reality. That spiritual existence, that eternal existence, that is the reality. Our physical existence here on earth, this is just a dim imitation of what that is, and very imperfect in comparison. So I found myself once again in this body and feeling a bit of pain, but I no longer felt fear. I no longer felt afraid of death. I just suddenly lay there thinking, wow, here I am. My heart's faulty. I could live. I could die. If I die, then I go back there, and that's wonderful. And so I just looked up at this poor young ambulance operator who was there for the first day, and he was white as a sheet. I think he was more pale than I was. He was standing there with defibrillator pads in his hand and saying, "Well, you're back with us." He said, well, I was about to zap you, I think were the words he used. And I just sort of said, wow, I've been gone a long time. What's happening? What's going on? And he looked at me with a quizzical look on his face, and he just said, no, you've only been gone for a minute. And I just couldn't comprehend that, because the time I had spent conversing with the angels and with Jesus and everything that had gone on, I felt it was at least 20 minutes to half an hour in terms of duration. And I was very amazed to hear that I'd come back within a minute. So to me, that just showed me, look, time is so relative. When you're in another dimension, time is not the same as it is here. I think they're not connected. They're very different time frames. If there is time as such there, they seem to be able to control it, see through it, be very flexible with time. Whereas here, time felt very restricted and limited. When Jesus came into me and joined with me, and he was healing me and working on me, I feel that was mostly a spiritual thing. He was working on my soul, my psyche, whatever you want to describe it as. And he was restoring, I guess, bad pathways and making them good. He was removing old pains and scars and negativity from my life, and just taking that out and replacing it with a fresh start, which I really did feel like I had at that point in time. Although there was some measure of physical healing, which did occur, or I did become aware of when I went to the hospital, because the experience did not stop once I was back in my body. It was as if the veil was very thin, and I could still hear, on occasions, I could still hear angels talking. I could still hear things being said. And I basically heard some of the angels. There's a couple of things they came to me and said. One was, an angel voice just said to me very clearly, we have healed 3 arteries, but there's one we cannot or won't heal. Which, okay, fine, that was all right. And another thing they said to me, one of these people we spoke to you about that you would meet is right now within a kilometre of where you're lying in this hospital. And I said, okay, this was all news to me. So Not long after that, when I went in to have the operation to go into my heart, the chief cardiologist in the hospital came to me and he said, you're a very lucky man. Usually men of your age, when they have this particular sort of heart attack, they usually die on the spot. He said, we call this the widowmaker. You are extremely lucky to have survived. He said, and also it appears you've had a previous heart attack, and you're also very lucky in that you're one of the people who seem to be able to reroute the arteries around blockages. So this is rare, but it does happen on some occasions, he said. And I thought to myself, I think that is the healing that these angels were talking about, was that they actually had rearranged my heart to some extent and the pathways of the arteries within my heart. But he said, there's one blockage that we need to go in, and we'll put a stent in that blockage, and that should be quite okay once we've done that. You have had a heart attack, but your recovery should be fairly good from this one. So that was, to me, quite miraculous and quite amazing that the angels had told me they'd healed this. The cardiologist then actually confirmed there'd been some very unusual rearrangement of the arteries in my heart. So I thought that was pretty spectacular. And then, look, about 2 weeks after coming out of hospital, I did meet a person who I went on to have a relationship with and marry, who was within 1 kilometre of the hospital at that time. So everything they said was shown to be true. They were looking into my future and telling me what would be going on, which is a very comforting thought, to think that there are these higher beings who are watching out for us, looking at which way we're going, which directions we're heading in, and if we can hear them, offering us as guidance on which way to go. Once I was back in my life and out of hospital and starting to recover, I had still had a heart attack, and there was some recovery to go through. And it was a gradual, slow process, but generally the medical people said, you've done very well. You've done okay out of this situation. So many people die, and you've come out of it with, mild damage to your heart that will be able to be restored over time. So I gradually started to build up again in my strengths, but there were a lot of things to adjust to. And it wasn't just the heart attack. And I mean, I know heart attack victims do have to adjust to a lot of things emotionally as well as physically. But this was different. I had been in a state of perfection. I had been in a beautiful condition, in this beautiful spiritual existence with these angels and with Jesus, and feeling just how incredible heaven is and how beautiful eternal life can be. And I was back in my body, and it was a big adjustment to make. It was hard to reconcile myself to the fact that I was now stuck in this physical body again. And a big part of me did not want to be here. And still to this day, a big part of me does not want to be here. I just want to be back there. I just want to be with Jesus, with those angels, and experience that loving environment again. So it's been a difficult adjustment to make. But at the same time, I was changed. I was profoundly changed by the experience and the things he did to me. It just restored in me a sense of hope. It restored in me a sense of destiny. And it just made me realize that what happens in this life is not all that important in terms of how much wealth or career success or the things that we value so highly in this existence actually mean nothing, because the moment you're gone, the moment you die, there's zilch, they are zero. It's like we have our priorities completely upside down, so that the things that we value, money, power, possessions, career, all of those things are meaningless once you are beyond this lifetime. And that, I think, has been one of the most profound changes in me, in that although I work, I have a job, it's just to get through this life and pay the bills and feed myself and do those things. But the things that really matter to me are what we're talking about today. The things that really matter to me are the eternal things that exist beyond this life. And the incredible fact that we live in a world where so many people deny the existence of these things, and yet we live in a multi-dimensional world with layers of heaven above us and angelic beings that are coming to and fro and incredible things that are going on. And so many people have their eyes closed to this. That I find frustrating in my life, in that I think one of the main things I want to do with my life is to open people's eyes to the fact that there is eternal life. Jesus does exist. He is all-powerful and amazing. There is a God, a Father God above him, who is the universe that contains all within him. We're a part of this incredible existence of a multiverse, really, not a universe, and that we have our place within it. And these are the sorts of things that have changed within me and totally turned my priorities upside down. So to me, it is all about sharing what we would call the kingdom of heaven, sharing the kingdom of heaven, letting it flow through me as much as I possibly can, telling my story, writing my book, and getting this message out so that people in the world can hear and understand, yes, this is a reality. It is not just something that exists in old books. This is something that exists here and now, and it is very, very, very powerful to those who will open themselves up to it. Initially, when I first came back, I was telling as many people as I could. I was slightly obsessed, I guess, with this whole experience, as is understandable. It is a massive experience to go through. But what really I noted very strongly was that very many people had a very negative response to this. Many people actually were quite cynical, and first reaction was to question the reality of this experience, and always is and always will be. And why is this? Because we are so trained by scientific, rational thinking to discount anything that's non-scientific and non-empirical. So that's the biggest hurdle and the biggest barrier, because people have these frameworks of belief that have been brainwashed into them, that unless we can touch it, unless we can see the results on a dial and know that scientists have analyzed it, that it's not real. That to me is the great enemy of where we are at this point in history, because there is a huge power called God and his son Jesus, his human manifestation, and these angels and all of these things that are so far beyond what we are as human beings, and yet we are closing off their attempts to communicate with us, their attempts to guide us, shutting the door to them and saying, no, we don't want to know about that. We'll just deal with science and physical fact. That to me is a great frustration. So after thinking this through for a few years and experiencing the sort of things that many other people who've had NDEs have experienced, which is this negative reaction, this sort of holding back and not wanting to know about it, I realized there's also another side to people, which is an incredible thirst to hear more about this. And it's very, very divided. Either people go this way or that. And there's a lot of people who are very hungry and thirsty to hear about this. And then I realized, once I came to that realization, I thought, well, I need to get this story out and properly written. So I've written a book. I've used the author name C. Thomas Perry. And the book is titled Dying to Be Alive. It's available on Amazon and most other booksellers. And that is a written account of the sorts of things I've spoken with you about today. But it's also going into the sorts of understandings that I've come to, and the way that God and Jesus have really guided my consciousness since then. So it's talking about things Jesus said in the Bible, and talking about how time relates to us and what time is and what it is to be beyond time. It's also going into the relationship between good and evil. It's also going into the sorts of levels of heaven and the fact that people down through the centuries and still today have visions and dreams that reveal to them things that are to do with the nature of the universe and that go beyond time and space and do show us things that are, to our way of thinking, miraculous. And that is really the main message of my book, is to open up that whole world, which I refer to as the kingdom of heaven, which Jesus referred to as the kingdom of heaven, and allowing that to flow through into our lives and to understand how powerful and how imminent, how close it is to us if we just enable it, if we just allow ourselves to accept that it's a reality. At this point in history, as you have mentioned, there are so many people who are surviving near-death experiences and living to tell the story and living to bring the story out. I don't think this is new. I think this has been going on for as long as there's been humanity. But what is happening now is I think our communication processes, not only our medical, but our communication processes are so much more advanced in that an individual story such as mine can now be spread throughout the world using the internet, using books, and that it's no longer something that remains secret. And we don't have an oppressive Roman Catholic Church government trying to kill people who come and say things like this, as we did centuries gone by. So on one hand, we have governments and powers in human society that are opposed, and generally we call it science. And that is very much opposed to the sort of things that we are talking about here. But there is a huge groundswell of people coming up and saying, no, there is more. There is much more that we are ignoring and choosing to ignore. And I really think that is the case, is that our society has chosen not to listen. Because now the voice of many, many people is becoming louder. And I would very much like to be a part of that movement, to publicize, to make sure that it's broadcast, that everyone hears, yes, this is a reality that is greater than our reality, that is stronger than our reality. And it is not necessary that we should be so afraid of death, and that we need to come to terms with our lives as a stepping stone into an eternal existence. That's the sort of message I think that is starting to come out at this point in history. It's a battle. It is a battle between those who are absolutely opposed to it and those who are for it and are hungry to hear more. So I think this awakening is going to continue and grow stronger. I think that's one thing I want to spend the rest of my life encouraging, is for people to think on this level and to understand on this level, and not to be dismissive, and to accept that there is a far greater reality, a far higher reality. We call it heaven, we call it the afterlife, however you want to refer to it, but there are powers of light and goodness and eternity and life that are above us and bigger than us and stronger than us. And I think our human egos need to be put aside so that we can accept their existence, their help, and learn what it is that they want us to do with our lives and with this planet. For those of you who may have lost a loved one recently, or for those of you who are inquisitive, curious, and want to know what death is all about, I can only encourage you to understand that we've been given the answers already, that the Bible contains so much wisdom and so much knowledge, and actually does describe multiple levels of heaven and the throne room of God and how it exists, describes and talks about how the angels interact with humanity. We've been given guidelines that are centuries and thousands of years old. My advice to you is to look into these things. Don't cast them aside just because they're old. This is beyond time. This is something that God has made sure we have available to us to understand. So look into it. Look into what Jesus had to say. Look into what Jesus had to say about the priorities in your life. You know, he did give us guidelines that said, for those who believe, for those who accept, there is eternal life. There is ongoing life. It does not stop with death. That was his job. That was his role in coming to earth, was to transmit this knowledge to people. I think we need to re-examine that in our own lives and come to understand who Jesus is and what his function is and how he can communicate with us and change our existence as a soul, on the soul level. That's my advice to people. Don't live in fear. Don't live in fear. Fear is the great enemy. If we live in hope and in faith for the future and for an eternal life and seek after those things, go down that path. What did Jesus say? I am the way, the truth, and the life. Go down that way, go down that path, seek for truth, and the end result will be eternal life. This is something I really believe. That's my advice to you. Go chasing after it. Don't just sit back and wonder. Chase after this thing, because this is big, it is amazing, and it is infinite.